What have we learned about sustainability in this course? Well, first, there's the conventional definition from the Brundtland Report titled Our Common Future, which was commissioned by the UN in 1987. Sustainability is about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Next, we add the understanding about the central role of energy and the second law of thermodynamics. The law of entropy states that as we use nature in human society, we use up the usefulness of it. Therefore, if sustainability is about leaving something for future generations, it requires that we dedicate a significant portion of resources and energy to regeneration and renewal of the natural and human resources that present and future generations depend on. The central challenge of sustainability is to design a world based on regeneration and renewal of human and natural resources. To do this, we need a continuously renewed source of high-quality energy to offset the effects of entropy. The main source of energy we have for that here on Earth is solar energy. Like nature, sustainable societies are rooted in solar energy in all its forms. Plants take sunlight and create complex chemistry, which is the basis of order and structure on Earth. For example, the long-term stability of the composition of gases in the Earth's atmosphere and the temperature of the Earth are maintained by a complex interaction between geology and life. Life creates the conditions for life. Human society needs to be based on a new set of principles that work in harmony with the laws of nature. Sustainable living is about designing, building, and maintaining sustainable communities. In this course, we've looked at new ideas for systems that provision us with energy, food, water, and materials, systems that put our waste into closed cycles, systems for economics and governance. What else do we have to do? Well, everything. We've got to rethink and redesign every aspect of human endeavor for sustainability. We're at the beginning stages of a 50 to 100-year sustainability revolution, and everybody on the planet will be involved. It will likely be bigger than the industrial and agricultural revolutions that preceded it. Like the beginning stages of the other revolutions, we can begin to see the broad outlines of sustainability, but the details will come with time. Like the other major shifts, at the end, we'll wake up with a completely different relationship to each other and to nature, with a different worldview, with a different way of being and doing in the world. This way of being and doing will involve a much more celebratory and collaborative relationship with nature, as opposed to the relatively adversarial one we have now. We can start at our front door. Becoming more efficient using solar energy and using non-toxic materials and processes can save us money and make our lives healthier. We should all embrace efficiency and substitution. But is that enough? Remember the definitions of deep and shallow sustainability. Shallow sustainability is using efficiency and substitution to reduce the effects of the existing system, but without doing much to change the overall worldview that the system is based on. It's motivated primarily by economic value. Deep sustainability puts efficiency and substitution in service to radical redesign based on a new worldview that uses ecology as a metaphor rather than the machine, complements reductionism with holism, and values many ways of knowing. Deep sustainability is grounded in an experiential and intellectual understanding of the unity that underlies the surface diversity of the universe. Deep sustainability is a new worldview. Deep sustainability gives priority to ethical and social values while recognizing the necessity of economic viability. Shallow sustainability, efficiency, and substitution are necessary but not sufficient. We need to be careful that the necessary doesn't get in the way of the sufficient. We need to make sure that efficiency is in service to doing the right thing. We need to go beyond being less bad to a positive good. At the same time, we have to start small most of the time, with small steps, like asking questions, watching this course, and trying out some of the steps I've suggested for finding sustainable opportunities in your home, your neighborhood, and your place of work. If you are headed to Canada in a car at 100 miles per hour and you really want to go to Mexico, is it enough to slow down to 50? It's enough if you recognize that that's just the first step. To be effective, you need to move toward that point at which you can turn around and go the other way. Being efficient at the wrong thing doesn't make it right. It only means that you are better at doing the wrong thing. The real opportunity for improvement in the human condition comes when we go beyond tweaking the existing paradigm with efficiency and substitution to a shift in worldview that is deep sustainability, regeneration, and renewal. Worldviews lead to a set of supporting technologies, infrastructure, and institutions. And in turn, the technologies, infrastructure, and institutions reinforce the worldview that underlies them. The worldview creates and continually recreates the world. Let's contrast the current worldview with a worldview of sustainability. In the excellent video Story of Stuff, Annie Leonard states that within 3 months of manufacture, more than 95% of materials that flow through the economy are in the landfill. From these perspectives, the major outputs of the industrial economy of today are wasted energy, wasted materials, and wasted communities. We need to change from a consumptive, throwaway society to a producing and conserving society. Here's some ways to start. Check out your local thrift store. You'd be amazed at the number of items you'll find that are new or gently worn. Many still have the tags on them. Organize yard sales or yard swaps. Get your food from your backyard or local organic growers. Use renewable energy and use it efficiently. Buy from local merchants in your downtown. Are these values conservative or liberal? It's probably a good thing that it is a bit difficult to tell. In this course, we've been exploring the technologies, infrastructure, and institutions that flow from a sustainable worldview. The sustainable world is powered by renewable energy. It works in harmony with the natural hydrological cycles, bases agriculture on ecological principles, including the life in the soil. It organizes humans across the landscape in eco-cities and eco-villages. It puts the economy in proper relationship to society and nature. It respects decisions that are not purely economic. It relocalizes the basic necessities of life: food, water, shelter, clothing, and livelihood. It puts significant resources into regenerating and renewing the human and natural resources that human well-being and the well-being of nature depend on. It's lived fully rooted in the abundant flows of natural systems for energy, water, soil fertility, and materials. It uses nature as a model and mentor for technology and systems. It puts technology in service to more people working, but working less at more enjoyable and satisfying jobs. It uses collaborative and inclusive governance and decision-making structures. We've looked at practical things we can do today: installing solar panels, making biodiesel from waste vegetable oil, harvesting rainwater, rain gardens, growing food at home for a 4-season harvest, becoming part of a CSA, voting with our dollars, building with local natural materials, and reskilling. When we put all of this together in the proper relationship, using permaculture principles derived from nature, we get designs for sustainable living. The permaculture design process creates wholeness from the disparate technologies of sustainability. Permaculture design is a formal method for designing human habitats that have the stability, diversity, and resilience of natural ecosystems. Permaculture seeks to create a permanent culture based on a permanent, sustainable agriculture. Bill Mollison and David Holmgren developed permaculture in the 1970s from observation of mature ecosystems. Permaculture is an ambitious and largely successful attempt to apply the principles that govern mature ecosystems to the design of human settlements. It's been used in climate zones all over the world, from temperate to tropical, from wet to dry. Permaculture design is functional design. Often the term design is used in the context of the aesthetics of an object, building, or landscape. Permaculture complements a concern with aesthetics with useful function in a landscape, building, or city. Permaculture is a practical method of designing with nature. Permaculture has a stated ethics, a set of principles, and a body of practice applying the principles. In this course, we've seen many examples of the application of these principles. There have been many formulations of principles over the years. The one below comes from Toby Hemingway, author of an excellent book on applying permaculture principles to gardening called Gaia's Garden. The principles cover three main areas: the principles of functional design, principles that are derived from energy or living systems, and principles related to attitudes. First, let's talk about the basic principles of functional design. Use protracted and thoughtful observation rather than prolonged and thoughtless action. Observe the site and its elements in all seasons. Remember and think about Ruth Stout's mulch gardening techniques, developed from observation of nature in her garden. Use relative location. Place elements in ways that create useful relationships and time-saving connections among all the parts. The number of connections among elements creates a healthy, diverse ecosystem, not necessarily just the number of elements. You can do this by locating the garden next to the kitchen. The kitchen garden is something you use every day. It's easy to step out for some fresh herbs. Food scraps can be brought to the compost pile when the compost pile is close to the garden, which is close to the kitchen. Another example of this principle is access by proximity from the lecture on city design. Access by proximity means that everything you need for your life, working, shopping, banking, recreation, schools, is located near where you live so you can get your needs met by walking or biking. Identify, collect, and hold the useful energy flows moving through the site. By saving and reinvesting resources, we maintain the system and capture still more resources. This is an application of the concept of entropy. We're working with the natural fact of entropy when we collect and store the renewable energy that flows around us. Another example is water use. Instead of using fresh, clean, potable water indiscriminately for every household use, we use water quality appropriate to the use, like using gray water for irrigation. Rain gardens and swales hold and store water in the landscape so we can get more use from it before it exits the property. Choose and place each element in the system to perform as many functions as possible. Increasing beneficial connections between diverse components creates a stable whole. Stack elements in both space and time. You do this when you plan your garden with plant guilds in mind, assemblies of plants that work synergistically together, each plant performing several functions in the guild. Each function should be supported by multiple elements. Redundancy protects when one or more elements fail. Once more, we can see this when we plan for multiple sources and storages of water. Make the least change for the greatest effect. Find the leverage points in the system and intervene there, where the least work accomplishes the most change. Sheet mulch gardening is an excellent example of this. What less can I do in my garden rather than what more can I do? Use small-scale intensive systems. Start at your doorstep with the smallest systems that will do the job and build on your successes with variations. We discussed this when we discussed garden establishment. Start with a 4x4 or a 4x8 foot garden. Develop skills and confidence and then move on to larger garden projects. Those are the basics. All right, now let's talk about principles based on energy or living systems. The edge, the intersection of two environments, is the most diverse place in the system and is where energy and materials accumulate. Optimize the amount of edge. This is illustrated by the diversity of people who gather around a successful makerspace. A makerspace is a great example of a complex connecting point where diverse people come together and share and learn from each other. Mature ecosystems are more diverse and productive than young ones, so use design to jumpstart succession. We can see this at work when planting guilds with fast-growing nitrogen-fixing plants and slower-growing fruit-bearing plants. The fast-growing nitrogen fixers are used to provide mulch and nitrogen in the early stages of the guild and are often removed later as the second-stage succession plants mature. We want to use biological and renewable resources. Renewable resources, usually plants and animals, reproduce and build up over time, store energy, assist yield, and interact with other elements. Planting a border of comfrey to keep out weeds is an example of this. As always, whenever possible, we want to recycle energy, nutrients, and materials. Supply local and on-site needs with energy from the system and reuse this energy as many times as possible. Using water as many times as possible as it flows through your system is an example of this. Use washing machine water to irrigate plants. Solar panels on your roof provide energy. The natural plaster demo we saw earlier used materials from the site to create beautiful plasters. These next principles are informed by certain sustainable living attitudes. Sometimes these attitudes precede our actions and choices, but oddly enough, sometimes they follow from actions we take and results we see. Think about turning problems into solutions. Constraints can inspire creative design. We are surrounded by insurmountable opportunities. In opposition to what we've all previously believed, weeds can become food, sources of compost, and indicators of nutrient deficiencies. Another thing we want to consider that's important in design is getting a yield. Design for both immediate and long-term results from your efforts. You can't work on an empty stomach is the slogan here. And another thing to consider is that design limits yield. The designer's imagination limits total yield more often than do the laws of physics. In other words, with strategies like guilds and plant stacking, you can always fit in another plant. Go for it. And remember that mistakes are tools for learning. Evaluate your trials. Making mistakes is a sign you are trying to do things better. After 35 years of working with sustainability, I am still trying new things and learning from my mistakes. One example, if I did Abundance Eco Village again, I would do it in a city to facilitate access by proximity. I'm in the process of designing a new home for my family. I am working to integrate everything I've learned in the 15 years since I last designed and built my home. We're moving from the countryside to the city so we don't have to drive as much. We're going to create an urban farm using the many sources of organic material for composting available in the city. We'll use rain catchment and solar energy. These systems have served us well. We'll make better use of building science than we did in our straw bale house to make the house easier to heat and cool. These are some things I've learned and I'm going to apply as I go forward. The next area I want to discuss is permaculture ethics. All design has an implied ethics. In permaculture, the ethics of the design system are stated explicitly. Permaculture ethics are not ecocentric or people-centric. They are co-centric, looking at people in the context of their relationship to the earth. There are three ethics. The first is care of the people. Design should meet the needs of people. For example, in designing with economic systems, put economics in service to people rather than the other way around. The second ethic is care of the earth. Design should enhance rather than diminish the capacity of the earth's systems and should consider the needs of all the creatures of the earth. The third ethic is share the surplus. Once your systems are set up and meet your needs and you have enough, and these systems are very abundant, share the surplus with others. Surplus may be time, knowledge, plant material, or any other surpluses from your system. Indigenous people like the Tlingit and Haida in the Pacific Northwest have used similar principles to live in the same place for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of years. In contrast, in just 200 years, North American settlers have reinvented agriculture along industrial lines, and in the process have diminished much of the productivity of the rich soils that they found here. The broad-scale farming systems that indigenous people used created much of the fertility of these soils. Mob grazing of buffalo, controlled by fire, created the rich prairie soils of the Midwest. The fertility of the agricultural systems of the Amazon basin was maintained through the creation of terra preta and biochar by the people who lived there. A few years ago, I was asked to go to Angoon, a Tlingit Native Alaskan village on a remote island in southeast Alaska, to explore ways they might use modern concepts of sustainability like renewable energy. The Tlingit and their ancestors had been there for 5,000 to 10,000 years. It's a richly productive ecological zone, and the Tlingit have a saying, when the tide is out, the table is set. There are massive runs of salmon, so thick in the streams that they can be harvested by hand. There are ample whales and seals. there are abundant berries and other plants for wildcrafting. They could get their needs met for food, shelter, and clothing with just a few months of work per year and spent the rest of the time socializing and developing a rich culture of craft, art, and storytelling. The Tlingit have a custom called potlatch, where resources get redistributed on a regular basis. It's a big party where the most respect goes to the people who give away the most stuff. It was outlawed by both the Canadian and US governments for a number of years. The governments wanted to integrate the tribes into a consumer culture, and the potlatch went against it. The potlatch system made it difficult for members of the tribe to accumulate long-term wealth. The Indian nations now have more autonomy in deciding their own cultural practices and values. Potlatches are now legal, and the potlatch is making a comeback. Many people in the tribe still do a lot of hunting and wildcrafting, referred to as subsistence activities, but they now also depend on the plane and the boat for the basic necessities of life. Even though Alaska has tremendous oil resources, energy is very expensive there. Energy bills are 10 times what people pay in the lower 48 states. So if you pay $100 a month, they pay $1,000. Elders are concerned that because of high energy costs, they may be the last generation to live in Angoon. The community responded by exploring renewable energy as a way to replace expensive fossil fuels and add another connection to nature, to the rich tapestry of connection that comes from their culture and way of life. Here are my students and I working with the community to install solar and wind energy to displace energy from diesel generators. Another great example of traditional wisdom is the use of canoe plants by the Hawaiian and Polynesian nations. I lived in Hawaii for 8 years and began teaching sustainability as I developed a small farm there. There is much to learn about sustainability from traditional Hawaiian culture. Thousands of years ago, the ancestors of the Hawaiian people developed the ability to regularly navigate thousands of miles over vast stretches of the Pacific in sophisticated double-hulled boats. They colonized the Pacific from Taiwan to Easter Island to Hawaii. And Hawaii is one of the most geographically isolated spots on Earth, thousands of miles from land in any direction. They did this by using a suite of technologies, including sophisticated wayfaring methods that were developed from deep observation of nature. Observation of birds, currents, and wave patterns can show the direction to land hundreds of miles away. They developed sophisticated methods for celestial navigation. They could travel anywhere in the South Pacific and recreate their culture using about 30 plants that they carried with them. These 30 plants, sometimes called canoe plants, include medicinal plants like noni and mamaki, building materials like bamboo, weaving materials like lohala, and food plants like taro, sweet potatoes, sugarcane, and breadfruit. All the plants had cultural significance, and some were used specifically for religious and cultural purposes, like tea and ava. Once they reached a place, they used the genetic diversity inherent in the 1 or 2 varieties of each plant they brought with them to develop hundreds of varieties suited to the new place. For example, Hawaii had no taro when Polynesians arrived, but now has 300 varieties of taro and is the center of diversity of taro in the whole world. Even today, hundreds of years after the start of colonization from the outside, you can find canoe plants in the landscape in Hawaii. Native Hawaiians and others still use these plants for a wide range of purposes, including food, medicine, building materials, and religious and cultural expression. Canoe plants are an excellent example of what we explored in Lesson 2 on getting our needs met through a landscape full of useful plants. Can we develop suites of plants that could be used to create a sustainable culture in a bioregion? The development of canoe plants and the exploration and colonization of the South Pacific by Polynesians is one of the most amazing things that humans have ever done, and may represent a technological achievement beyond putting a man on the moon if you compare along the lines of knowledge and other resources available. Unfortunately, colonization by outside forces has often suppressed valuable indigenous wisdom over the last couple of centuries, as we know from our history lessons. However, starting in the 1970s, there has been a renaissance in Native Hawaiian language, culture, and music. The use of traditional plants and the skill of voyaging across the ocean using traditional techniques have been revived, along with a burgeoning sovereignty movement and interest in sustainability. Perhaps perhaps such efforts can lead to the recovery of more ancient skills and their application to the contemporary issues of sustainability. Modern ecological design systems like permaculture borrow heavily from traditional wisdom about how to live in a place. Traditional wisdom is complemented with knowledge from modern scientific understandings about nature and the world. It's not an attempt to go back to something from the past. It's an attempt to create something new based on a new holistic understanding of science and traditional wisdom that has never existed before. With this combination of ancient wisdom, modern science, and a holistic worldview based on integrating the two, there's the possibility that the human footprint on Earth could be positive. As we've discussed, ecological footprinting tracks the impact of sourcing our materials and sinking our wastes, and helps guide efforts to equitably keep that impact within the regenerative capabilities of the Earth. But what if all the byproducts of human activity were wetlands, wildlands, and beauty? What if human activity acted in greater concert with the greater ecology of the planet? Well, then the human presence on Earth could be seen as a positive thing. One attempt to fit human technology into the larger systems of nature is the interdisciplinary study of biomimicry. Biomimicry is an emerging discipline that uses nature as model and mentor for the design of technology and systems. Currently, when people make things, we use high temperatures, high pressures, and toxic chemical processes. Contrast this heat, beat, and treat approach with how materials are created in nature. The abalone makes a ceramic for its shell that is tougher than the tiles on the space shuttle. It does this at ocean temperatures, at atmospheric pressure, and using the materials that it finds near it in seawater. Kevlar, one of the strongest man-made fibers, is made using vats of toxic chemicals reacted under high temperature and pressure. It requires large amounts of energy. Contrast this with spider webs. Spider webs are stronger than Kevlar, and spiders make them at room temperature out of the bugs that they eat. When spider webs have outlived their usefulness, they get turned into food for microorganisms and are cycled back into life. Pax Scientific Company has developed a water mixing device based on biomimicry that mixes 10 million gallons of water with the energy of 300-watt light bulbs. Pax founder Jay Harmon developed the Lilly impeller after studying fluid flow efficiencies in natural systems, such as air and ocean currents. Learning to base our chemistry and technology on these principles will likely occupy the work of several generations of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. Becoming native to the place where you live, rooted in the abundant flows of natural systems, is a central part of sustainability. And we can look for inspiration on how to do this from both science and traditional cultures. Often we're led to believe that the solutions all lie with individual initiative. But there is much that can be accomplished through individual initiative. But some things we need to do, like eco-city design, are beyond our abilities as individuals. Here's an example illustrating the tension between the importance of individual and collective efforts. Municipal waste, which is basically everything that's put out at the curb, amounts to about 1,600 pounds per person per year. Let's say that you get really good at recycling and eliminate the entire 1,600 pounds due to you. Well, but municipal waste only accounts for 3% of the waste stream in the US, so you'd still have a long ways to go. As Derek Jensen points out in his article, Forget Short Showers, personal change isn't always sufficient for social change. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good idea to start at your front door and do everything you can personally for sustainability. But at some point, we need to address the larger societal systems that personal change can't address. Thomas Berry calls the effort of rethinking the world and our place in it in terms of sustainability the great work of the upcoming generations. I think it's going to engage everyone on the planet over the next 50 to 100 years. The changes we need to make are, for the most part, changes that make our day-to-day lives richer. It's a better way to live. It's not a sacrifice to live with an ethic of care of the earth and care of the people. It gives our lives a greater sense of purpose and meaning. In large part, we know what to do to power human society with renewable energy, to feed human society using organic agriculture, and to house people in sustainable buildings. While technology can improve, the exciting thing is that these technologies are good enough, cheap enough, and available at the household scale, making it practical to adopt them in your life today. We've known how to do these things in most cases for a long time. Here's a 100% solar heated house that was built near cold, cloudy Boston by MIT researchers in 1939. Adoption of these technologies has been waiting for a shift in worldview, a shift in collective consciousness that would put them in service to a better world for all humanity. This world will likely be as different from the world we have today as the world of the hunter-gatherer or pre-industrial agriculturalist is from our world. This quote from Buckminster Fuller, one of the pioneers in ecological design, sums it all up beautifully. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. The goal of sustainable living is a better way of life, material sufficiency with more time for family and friends, human activity in harmony with the larger cycles of nature, and a sense of purpose and meaning. I invite you to begin imagining, creating, and advocating for sustainability today.